Hey, welcome everybody to LiveCast Conversation With. As always, I'm your host, Gene Bernier. On today's show, episode 23, we have Crystal Jensen with us. Crystal Jensen is the CEO of Mindful Expressions and the host of the Mindful Play Summit. Crystal is setting a new standard in Canada to regulate while you educate. Her commitment to self-discovery and mindset practices is reducing burnout and stress in both parents and educators. Crystal loves to lead those around her to form a deeper connection within and create safe spaces for growth to happen. As the CEO and founder of Mindful Expressions, the Mindful Educators Association, and the host of the Mindful Play Summit, Crystal specializes in implementation and integration of mindfulness practices within early learning environments. Crystal's programs nurture not only children's developing mind, but the parents and educators as well, creating a positive foundation for future growth and turning the crazy into calm and the curious into play. While mindful education is her primary job function day to day, Crystal, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. And my words cannot do justice to your journey, so I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me, Gene. I am super pumped to have this conversation with you. And, where do you want to start? I mean,
that's a lot. There's a lot of mindfulness. And so
absolutely.
I always want to know how people got to where they are, right? So obviously you didn't wake up when you were a young gal and go, I'm a mindfulness expert and I'm going to help people around education and teaching young children about being that. So absolutely. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, where did the nugget for this inspiration start?
Well, the nugget for my inspiration started about 10 years ago, where I began my personal journey around self-discovery. And, it's one of those things when you start to learn about mindfulness, you learn about meditation, you learn about self-development, and it's like reading a book and putting it on the shelf, right? You read that book, you put it on the shelf, you read another book, you put it on the shelf. And I went through about, I would say, 5 to 6 years of reading those books, going to the retreats, and putting those books on the shelf. Journaling and, just very, I would say, inspired to expand my awareness. But what really hit me was about 4 years ago when I went in from not only just knowing it to actually doing it. And that to me was the place of transformation. So for a little background, I'm an early childhood educator and I love to teach early learning children and spread the love around mindfulness, self-care, self-regulation, and the importance of connecting our mind and our body through learning. So this magical place wasn't always there for me. I opened up my center about 6 years ago and it was pretty much starvation of survival. When I opened my center, I thought, wow, is this really how it needs to be? And I faced extreme burnout. I was opening my doors, my hours were 7:30 to 5:30, but I would take on, the single mom, and her family at 6 a.m. because she wanted to get an education, and I kept children longer, and I really didn't honor the boundaries that I needed to set for my own family and my own self. And through this journey, I ended up really sick. I ended up with some burnout along the way. And I didn't really recognize it at the time. Why was my mind and body so disconnected? Why was my physical body always turning to sleep or turning to, external stimulants like caffeine? And on Friday, I just wanted to crack open a bottle of wine and just let loose because I wasn't able to regulate as I moved through my day. And I was recognizing that this isn't how I wanted to live my life. And this isn't how I saw myself in this journey. So I started to tap in a little deeper to my own mindful practice where I recognized that I knew a lot of this stuff. It was this innate knowing because I've read that book, I've put it on the shelf, or I went to that seminar and I learned all these things. But I realized that I actually wasn't doing the work. So as I moved through starting implementing these practices into my everyday and, to sum things up, I ended up, getting really sick in my physical self. As we talk about our emotional body and that we're not actually tending to our emotions that are happening around us or inside of us, we push it down and push it down and push it down, and we suppress it. So I started to get these physical things happening in my body. I ended up getting diagnosed with celiac disease. I ended up, recognizing that I had vertigo for 3 weeks at a time, and what was happening and the sensations in my physical body as I was moving through this, I would say, development, awakening, whatever you want to resonate with it. So as I was moving through that, I kept hearing in my mind, if you continue down this path, this is really going to hurt you. I kept, hearing myself louder as I was removing, the wheat and the gluten and the toxins from my body and the alcohol and certain things, and getting really clean from the inside out. I was able to connect to my intuition a little bit better. And I thought, okay, this is really interesting. As I'm healing from a physical kind of dis-ease, so to speak, and I'm recognizing what's happening, and I'm journaling, and I'm sitting there and I'm in discomfort. What's going on inside of me right now? So I decided I need to make a change. I needed to make a change in my life. I needed to make a change in how I saw myself, how others saw me, how I was responding to my family. I wasn't responding, I was reacting, right? Giving my all 10 hours a day to the children and the families, and then what's left to my own families at the end of the day as mom's sputtering out. So what actually happened was I changed my business model. Some of the practices that I was doing inside of the center, I was hiding them. It's like, okay, well, we do guided stories, journeys, versus saying we sit there and, we do some guided imagery or we do meditation. I was reframing it because I was afraid of what people were going to think of me. I was afraid of that judgment that was coming back in around, okay, well, you want to teach mindfulness and meditation to young children? Well, that's woo. So I went through a restructuring of my business. I rebranded, I renamed, and I came out with my philosophy that I knew by doing these practices in my each and every day, how it supported me as an educator. So the shift happened about, I would say, I was doing the practices 4 years ago, but 2 years ago, I rebranded and created Mindful Expressions. And I set out what our, core pillars are, what our philosophy is. And I stood behind that. And I said to myself, I believe that this has supported me coming out of burnout. This has supported me in my own programming. And those that want this work will come. Those that align with this philosophy will come. And it was a really big step into, I would say, removing the judgment of myself and removing the judgment of others, knowing that this work is definitely needed in the world. And those that will resonate will come. So I started bringing in the practices into the center, and, currently I'm sitting in our calm room here where we have mirrors all over the room, and we get the children to come in and talk about, themselves and their self-image, and we look in the mirror and we do, I am statements, and we move through the I am formulas, and the children do superpower poses and incorporate body movements to impress those positive beliefs into the subconscious mind at a young age. We sit there in silence, and, we use our imagination muscle, because it's proven that by age 5, 6, we go to school and the teachers are telling us to stop daydreaming and to just snap out of it. So as we move through these practices at a young level, I recognize as an educator that I was able to take that moment of silence. I was able to focus in on my breath. I was able to play my chime and do fun games, and the children were right there with me. And, moving through this motions, I've had a really good close friend of mine working with me in the center for a long time. And she was also healing some of her childhood stories and how her childhood was reshaped as we look in the mirror and tell ourselves how much we love ourselves. I could see a little tear coming down as she looked at me and she said, "This is so powerful." So my goals, dreams, and desires were really coming to practice because as a child, I wanted to be able to fully express myself, and I would express myself through music. And if we look at how children are raised in our generation, it's like, if you want to cry, you go to your bed and you close your door and you cry, right? You want to be seen, not be heard. And as we move through reshaping and rewriting the story of our childhood, because if we are not putting in the effort to reshape and that type of thing, we just pass it on to the children that we care for. We pass it on to our families.
Yeah.
So by connecting with that and understanding that I want to reshape the way that I lived my childhood, I want to reshape the way that the children in my care experience their childhood. It's a very inspiring place to be. And as we move through these journeys throughout the center, and we practice our imagination, and we go on some journeys, and we focus on good, positive things, and we share gratitude, and we have these celebrations each and every day. It's actually creating this new foundation of learning. It's creating this new way of how we experience our early learning years. And I'm just so fired up, because where Mindful Expressions is now, where Mindful Expressions is headed, and the burning desire inside of me to really support a world shift in consciousness and really support how educators are moving through their day, because I have felt burnout. I have been there. I have felt the physical stress on the body. I have felt the mental stress. And to be able to say to an educator, okay, these are some of the symptoms that I felt. Can you resonate? Absolutely. Okay. So now let me ask you, do you want to feel this way? Is that the norm? And I think just inspiring them to see it from a different light, that they can actually experience this. They can experience their role, their job, if they're a parent, whatever that is, they can actually move through this with ease and flow. So the whole philosophy is based around, supporting early learning years, but now taking that a step further and supporting educators. So really dropping in and supporting educators, parents, families, whatever that looks like, to not only foster some of these exercises with the children, but to do the work with the children. So it's this healing process of, okay, I'm doing my breath work, the children are doing the breath work. And they can have that state of being, they can have that state of just taking that time out. If you're going to starfish on the floor at 2 p.m., maybe the children are going to join you and take those deep breaths within as well.
Well, what I hear from that is it's an opportunity to model it, right? Like it's the old, do as I say, not as I do. And that was a very old mentality around parenting and education and stuff. And now what you're talking about is teaching the children about self-regulations and mindfulness by showing them and doing that practice with them, right? Because they're little sponges, and they're going to see that and see that it starts to make a difference and everything else.
Absolutely.
As well. Actually, we had somebody comment from Facebook. Jolene said, beautiful. I'm actually going to bring up her message here. So she's feeling this story very much and loves the work in this interview so far. So you know what, that message is resonating with people already. So
absolutely. When it's a beautiful piece where we can understand that we also have things that we're holding and fostering as parents and educators inside of us. But what do we do with that? And sometimes a child might show a behavior, and we have this expectation that they need to act a certain way because that was an expectation that our parents had on us. But to remove those expectations and understand that we're all here learning. And some of my biggest teachers are the children in the center, as they sit there and this one little boy is transitioning from a co-parent family, and he'll come in after being at one parent's home, and you can see that he's moving through his emotions because he's showing you through play. He's showing you through his body language. And instead of me just trying to name it or whatnot, I ask him, is there something going on inside of you? Yes. Do you want to talk about it? No. Okay. Where does that sit in your body? Do you want to try to let that out? And beautiful, beautiful reflection as I bring him outside the door and I say, teacher sometimes feels like that too. And do you want to try something new together? And we just rage. We just roar like a lion. We scream out loud. And it was very beautiful because I let him go first. And then he looks up at me and he said, it's your turn. And I just let it all out. And a little tear came down my face because it was safe. It was safe to explore. It was safe to feel those feelings. And I just want to say, Jolene, thank you for your comment. And it's nice to hear that others are resonating with this and recognizing that we can make that shift for the next generation. But it starts with connecting with inside of ourselves. Yeah. And as educators, as parents, the deeper that we can connect with ourselves, if that's with the mindful practices, if it's through study, if it's through constant repetition, or, really focusing on reprogramming that subconscious belief system inside of us, that we can move and flow through our day with ease. And there's things that come up that trigger us, and we can recognize that, but those triggers are a gift. And the moment we can say to ourselves, oh, there's something here, that's a place of growth, that's a place for learning. I think it's a beautiful reflection piece.
I like that, where you're talking about the trigger being a gift, right? Because earlier you talked about the difference between a reaction and response. And that's like a big thing. A lot of people don't know you can actually have a space in between. You don't have to let your reaction be your response. You can actually go, oh, I'm having this reaction. What does that mean? Like, where's that coming from? Like, as an adult, like you're talking about some stories that all need to be unwound. We all have stories. Like the majority of the things that I find that we do, that's like a little bit, you're like, why did I do that? I'd be like, because like you got something from your childhood got modeled, and a story got intertwined into your subconscious, and every time that trigger shows up, boom, that pattern turns on. Being able to actually have that mindfulness to be able to go, I'm having a reaction. What does that reaction mean? And does this, what it's asking me to, what I think I should respond with, is that going to allow me to be the best me possible? Or do I maybe need to like retrain that? And as an adult, if we can model that for the kids like you are, that's an incredible gift to teach them, to be like, I don't have to snap show at every trigger that I have, or just like fall in line. Matt, what a world we could actually live in if we were all right with our reaction and going, it doesn't need to totally equate to the response we're going to give.
Absolutely. And I love how you position that, where it really just starts with our thoughts. Right. And when we trigger, a lot of the times we don't know because it's a program, but I'm going to give a scenario. So we've got the circumstance, and the circumstance doesn't change as we take a right path and a left path. So for this example, we're going to say the circumstance is our children are sitting there watching TV. That's the circumstance. And we talk from across the room and say, okay, kids, it's time to turn off your TV. And they don't listen. So that's the circumstance. I'm sure no one's ever had that experience before, right? So my one side of my perception goes, oh, no one's listening to me. I'm constantly unheard. I'm frustrated. And I react in a way where I am actually just a little snappy mom. And we could go down that path, but we're not going to go there. Yeah. So same circumstance, and I'm going to shift my thoughts, and I'm going to pause in between, and I'm just going to think a little bit differently because we're in control of our thoughts. So circumstance, children, I ask them to turn off the TV. They don't listen. I'm going to pause for a moment. Okay, they're not listening to me. So what story am I telling myself right now? So that's a really great question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reshape my thoughts, and I'm going to say, maybe they didn't hear me. So I'm going to move my body, and I'm going to position myself in front of them so they can see me. And I'm going to say, children, did you hear mom ask you to turn off the TV? And they say, oh, no, because our children are just sucked right into that, that tube, right?
Yep.
And now my circumstance and my response, the circumstance changes, but my response will always reinforce that belief. Yep. And in turn, they turn off the TV and we move and flow in a whole different direction. So the idea is to get to a place where we're aware of our thoughts, we're aware of those, belief systems, we're aware of those triggers that are happening, because there's a habitual pattern, there's a habitual cycle that keeps happening. And the moment that we can stop for a moment and just be aware of that. And, we had launched a fun little challenge. It was called Tame Your Trigger Challenge. And it's all about that. Right? Focusing in on what's happening around us. Maybe you're triggering at the same time in the kitchen. And because maybe in your childhood, you always got yelled at when you used the microwave, right? Like there's so many different things we can, go down the rabbit hole. But what's interesting is once we can find that pattern and we can take back those layers and really see what that belief is, we're able to reshape how we respond to our children, because we're actually honoring that emotion inside of us. And when we can tap into that as an educator, and we are practicing with the children, and that's part of this program that we have in the center, but also the program that's being created for other centers, for other parents, and through the Mindful Play community, is to support educating ourselves to form that deeper connection, to go within and to really focus in on mindset, really focus in on those limiting beliefs and flipping that script, so to speak. I mean, that word, that phrase has kind of been a little overused, but understanding how we can change the game, how we can show up for ourselves in a different sight and say, you know what, I don't want to be a victim of my old patterns anymore. I want to step into who I truly am and share that light with the world, because we all are here for that greater purpose. And when we can tap into that and start understanding why we're doing the things that we're doing, and recognize that we're all human, and from 0 to 6, really, we've just been programmed from what we've been told. So if our parents have been in a coaching, oh, do this or do that, or try better, try harder, because they want what's best for us, what happens is the self later on in life starts judging everything. Well, I'm not good at that. Or, this reel keeps coming into the mind, instead of reinforcing, I am strong. Or, you know what? I see the effort that it took for you to draw that picture. And we focus on the effort. We focus on, not just, oh, nice picture, but look at the effort that took to get there. That's where the shift really can come into play.
I really love the focus on the effort, right? Because that's what can be controlled out of it all, right? And giving them permission, and giving yourself permission. I'll switch around permission and say compassion, to be okay to put the effort in, even though it might not be the best drawing that you could ever done. Did you enjoy it? Did you get something out of it, trying something new? Was it an all right space to be able to go, do I have a history of being okay trying new things, right? And then it's just that if you can ingrain that at a young age, well, then all of a sudden they might be able to look at their patterns in a totally different way, right? You talked about circumstances. There's always something that kicks off those pattern loops. The thing we can only really control is how we respond to that and how we choose to respond to that, right? Like the kickoff and the reward of a pattern, they don't change. And that's been proven. So all you can do is short circuit that middle. There's no getting rid of a pattern, because there's always going to be those external things. Do you want to be driven by external responses all the time? Or do you want to live like that really purposeful, directional, intentional life?
Absolutely.
And that comes with practice, and a lot of it.
Practice and persistence. And once you can recognize how you want to reshape that, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes years and years. And what was really interesting for me is I didn't always love myself. I had this reel in my mind that was playing, and I actually didn't pay attention to it until 4 years ago, when my 7-year-old daughter, who's 10 now, started to show me that she didn't love herself. And I thought, interesting enough that this, child of mine is mirror image. Oh, I just get goosebumps when I talk about it. Mirror image of me, right? Yeah. And I wouldn't actually have paid attention to what's going on inside of me until I saw it in her and thought, okay, I need to really focus on checking in on myself here, because at each, my children are 3, 6, and 10, and I can really truly see how I was showing up as a parent. And there's no judgment, but I can see how I was showing up as a parent for myself in all of them, because they have different things in their development, where my 3-year-old is super vivacious, and she'll come up and tell you, I'm strong, I am brave, I can do anything. And she's got these little mantras, I try, I can, I will, and I am, and all of these little things that we now embody. But I wouldn't have focused in on my self-love if she didn't mirror that back to me 3-4 years ago. And it was really sad to see, because I could see the pain in her. I couldn't see the pain inside of me, but I could see the pain inside of her. And I thought to myself, let's do this together. So we started working on mirror work and standing in the mirror and looking at us. And, there I am, coaching and mentoring, learning with her, and it's uncomfortable because I hadn't even worked through this myself.
Yeah.
And to see that she, we'd write things on the mirror and we would work together at it. She couldn't even say some of the things. And now 3-4 years later, because what we're doing is we're reprogramming the subconscious mind. We're telling the subconscious mind the things that we want to hear, because eventually those will come to life and we'll start to believe them.
Right.
When people say fake it till you make it, but we're really just impressing upon that, that belief system that we want to see in ourselves. Yeah. And I'll tell you, now when we stand in the mirror and we say these things to ourselves, you can actually see her believing it. You can see the smile on her face. And we celebrate together because I am now seeing it within myself. And I still do my self-confidence formula in the mirror every morning to bring that in and to also lead by example and show her that mom is still working on this stuff through and through. If you looked at a video that I had a year ago of myself, there I was hiding in front of the camera, right? And now stepping into that essence of here I am, and I am, a leader in what I'm truly believing in, and just being able to share that, it's like removing the shackles. It's like stepping into that person that's always been there. I just never saw that inside.
Yeah. You're right, that person's always been there, but you've had those stories that were layered on top of it. Like, yeah, you say your daughter couldn't say those, but I bet you were in that same boat looking at some of those words going, that's not true. That's not what I got programmed in it, right? Like when we talk about like reprogramming, I look at it as like the subconscious is a big supercomputer, and it takes a lot of data and consistency to go, this is not the story anymore. This is not the story anymore. And it doesn't care about good or bad. It's just going, well, this is what you told me, so this is how I'm protecting you. Do you feel protected? Be like, well, no, not anymore. I feel gross. So how do we fix that? And there's nothing more powerful than when you see your child do something. You're like, where did you get? Oh my God, I know exactly where you got that from. Oh, like that's such a slap in the face. For you, I'm always curious, was that a very specific event, or was that like over a course of a few events? Because some people I've chatted with, like there's a very like clear, like this happened. And then there was the door was open and there was no going back. Was that like that for you when you saw that in your daughter?
Yeah, I feel that there was a progression of some of her behaviors that I was seeing. And because we come from a blended family, there was a lot of comments about her hair being different, her eyes being different, and certain things. And we would always celebrate the differences in ourselves. But when the mirror showed up with one incident, and I'll just kind of leave it out just to kind of keep it confidential for her, I thought, wow, 7 years old, and this is happening right now. I really need to check myself, because looking at the behaviors and because I'd been going through such a self-development, self-awareness journey, I was able to see and understand that everything that happens outside of us is a direct reflection of what's happening inside of us on some level. And in order for me to share and to show and to help that shift, I needed to do the work for me.
Yeah.
And, by saying that, I get goosebumps from head to toe, because it's easy for us to say, you need to change, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. But when we can actually take that moment and go inward and say, how is this directly reflecting to myself? How is this directly reflecting to how I see myself? And by doing the work for us, we know, and, by including that person in with us on the journey, if they're able and willing, great. But by doing the work for ourselves, we send out that vibration, and we're actually able to support the healing from generations. And we kind of know about that through our learnings, right? Was it easy? No, we're still moving through the motions. We have some good days, we have some bad days, but it's very inspiring to know that I'm not doing it alone. And as we move and flow together, she's right there with me. And the shifts have been just very, very beautiful to witness and to move through with her.
That's incredible. That's just incredible. And to be able to and what a parental bond that is creating with your oldest daughter too, right? To be able to have that as a bit of a foundation moving forward. Like, some people don't have good relationships with their parents because there wasn't that emotional connection, and they never really know why it wasn't there. But being able to do that and walk that together, I imagine it's going to be powerful down the road.
Absolutely. And, I'm recognizing my middle child, my son, he'll say things like, I'm not good at soccer. I mean, he's amazing at soccer, or I'm not good at reading. And, I'm recognizing that I'm a perfectionist. And over the last few years, I've been learning to show up as done is better than perfect. We talk about, my computer, it's a bit glitchy, but showing up and just showing up as my authentic self, my message will be heard. And when I see little things showing up in him, I recognize now I need to also do the work. And it's this ever reminder that, we have the ability to support our children in their development, and we're fostering who they become. And is that one of my biggest strengths and weaknesses? Absolutely, because I'm hard on myself. I judge myself for how I show up, and, breaking through that barrier and it's showing up in him. It's like, okay, now we need to check ourselves. And again, there's no judgment, right? There's no right or wrong. There's no, oh, I'm a bad parent. None of that. It's all about just that awareness piece to say, oh, interesting. So why do you see yourself in that way? And what story are you telling yourself right now? If there's one piece of advice to take away from this, is asking yourself that question, but also asking your children those questions, because he'll say to me, like, I'll give you an example about, we didn't get to play Lego before bedtime, and he had a bit of a meltdown, and I said, well, what story are you telling yourself right now? We can play tomorrow, that you don't love me because we didn't get to play Lego. So those types of things where we might say something or put on a little bit of a firm parenting hat and not realize that they're internalizing that. And, I'm firm but fair, but please tell me what story you're telling yourself so we can work through that together, so that you're not going to sleep thinking that you're not loved. And, when we ask ourselves in that moment, how can I support you right now? Or asking your child, but then asking yourself, how can I support myself right now? And making sure that I'm being true to my parenting, and making sure that I'm being true to myself to say, you know what, you're right. I can see how you're feeling that way, but this isn't the truth. Mommy still loves you. And just reshaping that belief as it comes up, I think is really important to move forward together, and kind of nipping that stuff in the bum when it happens.
Yeah, allow them to have a much different, better story that can circulate, right? Like it's truly important, right? And playing Lego at bedtime is so important. Like
that connection piece for sure.
Well, yeah, it's like that. They're I guess part of what you're doing through play is like that's a communication component, right? It's important to have that play with kids and as adults too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I wanted to touch a little bit about our breath work and stuff like that. I'm full disclosure, I'm 36 years old. I know people never ask age, but I didn't actually learn how to breathe until a few years ago. And when you tap into that breath, if there's one thing that we can tap in to really support ourselves, is our breath. And, by teaching our children how to breathe, by teaching our children how to connect with our breath, it really creates that foundation for future learning. And if I could have learned how to breathe or how to self-regulate at, a base level in my early years, it would just have been this normal thing. It's like, okay, well, we walk, we learn, to crawl, we learn to walk. Well, let's learn to breathe. And I know that's a very big piece of my passion, because, I'm sure some of our listeners today can resonate and think to themselves, wow, absolutely. I'm just learning how to connect with my breath. Or, hey, it's been 5 years, but that's been a big shift in my development, is just connecting in with our breath. And when we use the word mindfulness, it's a wide, vast kind of umbrella of everything in between. But if there was that one piece to kind of bring forward, would be to connect with breath and to get comfortable sitting in your own silence, right? When you close your eyes and you're sitting there for 5 minutes at a time and you can just calm your mind, there's lots of thoughts that come in and out, and that's normal. but just bringing it back to our breath and spending time, connecting with ourselves. And I giggle because some parents, like myself, where do you find that time? I would have an extended bathroom break, or I'd find myself, hiding downstairs for a few minutes just to take those moments of silence. But, my question is, when you close your eyes and you get quiet and you calm your mind, what gets loud inside? Those little feelings, those little thoughts, and kind of paying attention to that, because that's where we can recognize how to listen to that intuition, how to listen to what's going on inside of us, and just keep coming back to our breath.
I think that's so spot on, Crystal. And, when you talk about breathing and learning how to do it, most people will be like, well, I know how to breathe. It'd be like, yeah, no. Like, there's a lot of people that just do shallow breathing, right? So maybe dig into the difference between when you talk about like what somebody who has never heard about breathing exercises and what they could learn, and what's the difference between just standing here breathing and doing like really focused breathing.
Absolutely. So with the children, we do shape breathing. So most common is the box breathing, right? A lot of parents also resonate with this, if you've ever heard of it. The intentional breathing slows down your nervous system, right? It actually reduces stress and anxiety. So if we were to bring you through a breathing exercise, we would picture a box and we would bring ourselves up. As we breathe in, we would hold going over, and then you can't even see my finger on the screen. And then we would breathe out and we would hold, and then we would come up again and breathe in and hold and breathe out and hold. So if you find yourself needing a break and you go and you sit on the toilet, it's like always talking about toilet talk. You sit on the toilet and you just bring in your box breathing. You bring in that intentional breathing. It could be, breathing in for 4 counts and breathing out for 6. What you're doing is you're bringing your focus back into your breath. You're having that moment of intentional breathing where you're focusing in on your breath. And this doesn't come just naturally. I really had to set timers on my phone. I had to set sticky notes up wherever I was high traffic, by the fridge, wherever I was triggering, I would put it, and then you stack some of this stuff, right? Okay, well, today I'm going to work on my breathing. I'm going to set the timers on my phone and just bring it back to my breath. Maybe you're sitting at a red light and you want to breathe. Maybe you're going to pick your children up from, school, and you just want to sit and have that breath moment. So it's setting yourself up throughout your day where maybe you're more heightened and you find yourself being agitated in the morning, and where can you stack some of those habits? But whatever that looks like, it could be any type of breathing exercise, but the idea is it's intentional and that you're focusing in on your breath for that moment. And it could be simple as just, sitting there and you hear your child crying and you can hear them going, in 2, out 1. And even if we did that for a moment, what is that doing to our nervous system, right? And when we start to pay attention to how our children are breathing, or all of a sudden your spouse or your partner or your friend just, they start sighing, and instantly you're like, oh, are you okay? But they're naturally regulating their system, and they might not know they're doing it. But if we start to just focus in on that a little bit deeper and pay attention to what's happening while situations are occurring, you can actually recognize that your body is craving that. Your body is naturally taking that oxygen in to help regulate. And by setting the timers, putting up the sticky notes, that just creates that more habit where eventually you won't need those, because you'll notice ahead of the response that you just need to take a moment to connect inside.
Yeah. And that's the one piece I like to point out too, is like, so many people think that deep sigh is like, oh, it's a bad thing, what's happening? Be like, let them have that sigh, right? That it just, I talked when my kids were younger, it'd get them to do deep breaths and be like, look, your body thinks you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. That's what we were programmed to do. That's why you're like, Now we need to remind it by doing that deep breath. into the diaphragm and holding it is that we're not being chased. And it's when you're breathing like that, your body gets that signal going, oh, we're not in danger. I guess we can stand down. Right?
Absolutely.
And that happens, in our current world, like you say, like those triggers happen and our body still reacts the same way as if it does when we were fighting off the saber-toothed tiger, right? So we're going to go through a lot of fight and flights throughout our day and needing that very conscious breath to release it and let that energy out and just be like, regulate, because there's a whole lot of like hormones and chemicals that are flowing through our bodies that get brought back into a good spot, right? Like you talked about burnout earlier. That's stress, and stress does horrible things prolonged to the body. So how can you capture that ahead of time so that you can have a little dose of stress? Might get you to move, might get you to answer something that needs to be dealt with, but you don't need to hold on to it for years.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I would judge, my spouse. It's like, well, judge myself. He'd sigh and I'd think, everything okay? Did I do something? And a good coach and mentor of mine, she said, just match him. So when he does it, you just do it for yourself and see how it feels, and just reshaping that thought pattern, because it's easy for us to think, oh, they're sighing at me and I must have done something. But in reality, recognizing that he's taking that moment for himself, and maybe I should just join him and take that moment with him.
Go sit in the puddle with him.
Totally. So good.
That's awesome. Well, like I had said at the top of this, all of a sudden time evaporates, Crystal. We're already at 42 minutes into this. So, and we've had some comments as well. Thank you to Shaughnessy for saying that this was a great interview. So definitely what you're sharing here is resonating with people. So what's next for you and your journey?
Well, what's next is we are moving through the next little bit with some workshop series for parents and educators, all about connecting with self, looking at bringing calm into your environment, into your space, and then being able to support and integrate these practices with others. I'm going back to school on Thursday.
That's tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. And I'm taking a mindful-based stress reduction program to better support educators and families. And I'm also taking a certification to be a mindfulness workplace facilitator. So that's taking place as well. And I'm just a, little student of life, and love bringing in, the mindset piece, the mindfulness piece. But where my passion lies is to be able to not only support the children, but have the tools and have the resources to take it a step further and support those families and parents, and being able to educate them around the practices that we're teaching these children, so that it doesn't just stop at school. It doesn't just stop at the center, but the parents can really continue these practices at home. And we have been super blessed and grateful for all the families that are currently in our Mindful Expressions program here in Kelowna. And we want to, I want to expand the reach out into the community. So there's lots of fun things that are kind of in the pipe, ready to just expand and explode. And I'm very excited for all these little talks, and just really, grateful that you invited me on your show.
Oh, of course. This what it's all about, is sharing the gems of our journeys and what's going on. And this, like I say, is resonating. And, now it's about how do you go impact more? And it sounds like you've got a bit of a plan for that. So it's going to be an exciting next 12 months for you.
Absolutely. And being able to bring the program out into other centers and, be able to have the reach a little bit further than just in our little space that we have here.
Yeah, just you're helping the next generation be a lot more regulated.
Yes, and educators, right? The whole little motto of regulate while you educate, and recognize that we don't have to just be living our lives in burnout or just showing up for a job. We want to inspire. We want to create that next generation. So that's my why. That's
awesome. I love it. Well, to end every show, I always ask, if you could go back in time, what's that one piece of advice 10 years ago would you give Crystal then?
I would give myself the advice to believe in myself and to love myself. And as I shared with you here, and I shared with my daughter, that, mommy took quite a few years not loving myself, and to really see myself how others see me, in that light. So that would be the advice I would say to myself is be kind to yourself and love yourself first.
I love it. I love that a lot. So again, Crystal, thank you so much for being on episode 23.
Thank you.
This is the wrap up of another great episode. Next week on Wednesday, we have Bob Berg, the author of The Go-Giver, coming on the show. So it's going to be another good one. That'll be episode 24 on our March to 100. So thank you, Crystal, and everybody else for liking and commenting. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.